episode 107 to Chaps Mini Cultures. And today we address the question, how much is going to fit into that suitcase or maybe that container that you're packing for your overseas assignment? How are you going to make that home a home abroad? That's a challenge, and that comes with certain considerations. We'll talk about them. Stay tuned.
Hey!
There's the Brettster in his home away from home that looks like he's in a
I'm
home.
sunning myself by the ocean. This is my my beach cabana. Trust me on that.
I do. I
my
trust
home away from home.
How homey is it where you are right now?
Very, very homey. It's very homey indeed. Very cozy. Welcome to Chaps Many Cultures, episode 107. This is the show on culture of business and the business of culture. Coming to you live every day. If you like what you hear, consider subscribing to both our channels and set the old ding so that you'll know when we go live each day. And welcome, whatever platform you are on and whatever home you're in, of course.
Exactly. And have you put a kettle on yet to make some tea or no?
I should have, yes. A cup of tea would have been very nice at this time of the afternoon with a nice biscuit, perhaps.
Nice biscuit. All right.
A nice biscuit.
I mean, we're only halfway joking, right? Because when we work with our clients, they are either unpacking their stuff at the new destination or they're getting ready to have the stuff that they packed or are about to pack or in the process of packing shipped off to the destination. And the question often comes up, well, what am I going to take? And should I take this? And if I take this, will it work? And what do you think? Because when they talk to us, they look to us as, well, you've done this before. You should have all the answers. And sure, we do. Don't get me wrong. We have lots of answers. If they're the best answers, that's depends on the topic. But I've heard some interesting questions about whether or not to ship an item off into the new location. What was the funniest or most concerning thing you've experienced in your work?
Well, it's actually not the funniest. It was quite impactful, and I think this is why I bring it up with every client intentionally. Really delve into this, into how much they've put thought into this. Because a number of years ago, I worked with a young guy, single guy, heading off to Australia, heading off to my hometown of Sydney, interestingly enough, and I guess like most young, I mean, I moved to this country as a single guy. I just packed a suitcase and thought, yeah, that's all I need. And as most of our clients like that might think, oh, well, I can travel light, so I can probably just do that and get away with it. What I found interesting during the whole day of doing this training through the cultural business, even the business side of it, we had met in his home, and he was actually, every time it got to something where he seemed a little unsure of the answers, or perhaps he hadn't thought something through. It's interesting that he was sitting on his couch and he reached across to this particular blanket, which happened to be a Boston Red Sox blanket. And when it got down to talking about packing stuff, I said, look, I couldn't help but notice, don't call me nosy, but every time that something was a little unsure, whether it be business or personal related, you seem to reach out for this blanket. Can you tell me about this? And he said, and I said, oh, well, no. I said to him, are you going to take this with you? And he said, oh, no, I'm packing everything else, going to send it back to my mum, and she's going to store it for me. And I said, well, tell me about this blanket. And he said, I just remember that I've had this blanket since I was a kid, and I used to go to the ball game with my dad, and we used to, late in the season, of course, it would get a little chilly, and we'd take this blanket, and we'd huddle under this thing, and it'd be kind of like that tradition, right? You'd take this blanket, you never left home without it, and I said, so is there something? So you've got it here, obviously, now in your new home, because he wasn't actually in his hometown. He said, yeah, he said, it's interesting. He said, it is important to me because my father passed away from cancer 2 years ago. And whenever I feel stressed, whenever I've had a bad day at work, whenever I've had, you know, a challenging day, this is what I come home and cover myself with. That hit me like a rock. And I said, so dude, are you going to pack this thing now? And he said, absolutely. Because I said, look, stuff will suck, man. I mean, I know you're a single guy and I know you're going to Australia and you think you're going to have a great time. Times will suck. They'll still suck there just like they suck here. And you're going to what, and how good will it be to come home and have this? And it was just so impactful. And I tell that story. I got his permission. I said, you mind if I use this story? Because I've dined out in this story for years. But it was really impactful for me. And when I tell that to people, they really do stop in their tracks and they say, well, yeah, that's a good point. So, and then they start looking around, right? They start looking around the room. So it's interesting.
And I find both extremes, right? So we're in a day and age of instant gratification, instant delivery, order it online now, have it at your doorstep maybe a couple of hours later. So it's easy, or at least in Western culture, it's easy for us to be tempted to thinking, well, I don't need to pack all this because I can cheaply replace it with temporary, semi-temporary stuff that I will tolerate the lower quality because it will see me through my assignment, and then this will all be paid for by whatever housing allowance I have from my employer. And yes and no, I'm not saying this is a wrong approach. And then there's the others who want to pack everything in their container as if they are really gutting their home and putting all their belongings in a container and shipping it off as if they were immigrating for good and never coming back. And so I've seen both of these extremes, and I think it really depends on the person's or family's lifestyle and decision making and choices, whether that's a good idea or not. I think if you have items that are somehow emotionally charged, like the blanket you mentioned, these items, these inanimate objects, become anchors into our memory library, right? So they represent a certain experience. They represent experiences that are important to us. So if you're gonna make your home abroad a home, and if it's only temporary, you want to be scouring your present home mindfully and thinking about, well, is this picture relevant? Do I need this generic print of the Manhattan skyline that I bought at Ikea 4 years ago? Am I going to need that abroad? Or is it this scrabbly sketch drawing that my 4-year-old did in kindergarten that I may or may not like aesthetically, but that's really important emotion? I mean, I'm making the choice simple here for you, but those can be the extremes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to acknowledge we've got a couple of guests here on this. We've got Mike, a Canadian.
Hi, Mike.
Canadian buddy. Hey, Mike. And of course, Christina. Very, it was a nice story, and that's why I tell it. You know, it does demonstrate things. Buonasera, yeah. And so, you know, I think that when we talk about things with necessity or comfort, are we talking about things that are necessary? Some people might say that things of comfort are necessary, right? There are things that are comfort. There are innocuous things like kitchen implements, knives, and so you might not think, well, why would I need that? But if you really love to cook and you love to cook with your gear,
yes,
there is nothing better than to have your gear in the kitchen. A good knife, good favorite utensil. And these are again some of these things that us as highly trained people in this, highly trained experts in this field, sometimes just prompt people to consider. And it's things about even just telling the story about, imagine a crazy day in your office or out in amongst the world of your new culture. And isn't it nice to come into a place? We often underestimate how much our peripheral perception informs our comfort.
Yes.
And so we want to kind of try and recreate that for them, or think about them recreating that in a new space, because again, stuff will suck, right? It just will.
Yeah, stuff will suck. And if you don't have your kitchen gear or knives, I have one particular knife. I think we brought that from Germany many years ago.
Right.
And to this day, I get really charged. I'm not going to say the word that I was going to say, but I'm get charged if my knife's not in place, or if somebody in the kitchen is using the knife that I need in order to successfully finish this cooking task, right?
Right.
The most important thing for us, just to show you how silly some of these comfort or necessity things are, or silly on surface level. When we moved, one of the gifts that my wife and I had received for our wedding was an espresso machine. It is not just a espresso machine; it is an espresso machine.
Part of the
And
does it have a nickname, by the way? I would be surprised if it doesn't in your
it
household.
does not have a nickname. Sometimes we call it the Beast, but it's
or when it doesn't
really
work.
have a nickname. But Christina will understand this as she's watching this. This machine was made in Milan. So the company doesn't exist anymore. I think they were sold to another one. It used to be called Espresso Company Milano, ECM. And ECM has one switch on off. Everything else on this puppy is manual, and it does not have a voltage switch. So coming from Central Europe, where most of the circuits are in 220 or 230 volts, moving to North America, how are you going to make that work? Well, we did, because I needed it. That's the most important tool in our kitchen, is the espresso machine. If that puppy isn't working, mommy and daddy aren't happy. So things are going to suck hard if that thing doesn't work. So we moved into a house, and the first thing we did was talk to the electrician and say, hey, we need a 220 volt outlet in the kitchen. And he looked at me like I was moving from moon and said, what do you need a 220 volt outlet in the kitchen for? Because those of you who live in North America, you know that 220 volt comes to the house, but is usually kept in the laundry room where you put the high power appliances in. In the kitchen, you may need it for the stove, but the stove was already there. So the electrician was like, what do you need this for? And then I pointed at the espresso machine, and he was like, you're crazy. I said, yes, I am. Make it work. So, so yes, comfort, sure. Unnecessary? Question mark. Maybe for you, very necessary for me, right?
It's all very personal. Well, think about kids, right? You know, especially if you've got young children, what better way to make them comfortable? You know, this is a discombobulating experience for them, especially if they're young. They're living in the moment. They're not really sure of what's going on. They know they're moving, and they just probably don't have the perception that they're moving such a long way at this stage. I'm talking young kids, like, 3, 4, 5, even up to 6, maybe. And then imagine just being able to have them lay in their bed with their pillow and their bedding, so that, or even their bed, just that again, that peripheral perception of them walking into a place and go, oh, this is my bed. This is a different house, but it is our
But the
home.
blanket, that what touches your body, or what you put into your body, is, I think, it carries a lot more meaning. We brought blankets too, right? In North America, bedding is typically just a blanket, no down comforters. In Europe, many people have down comforters. We brought down comforters from Europe because, I mean, while I can sleep in an American bed with a regular US bedding, I sleep much better and I feel much more at home if I have the bedding that I'm used to, that I grew up with, right? So bedroom, kitchen, for some it's the images around the house. It could be just a simple electric tool, right? Now here's where I draw the line, or here's where I would advise expatriates who are about to embark on their trip. The espresso machine, sure, that's a non-negotiable if you're a person like me. If it's your hair dryer, an item that can be easily replaced with a $50, $30 Amazon purchase, I probably would think maybe it's easier to find the one abroad that will serve you for those 3 years. You don't necessarily need to pack that.
I couldn't go anywhere without my hair dryer.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry to disappoint you. Well, what a lot of people ask is, will my TV and my gaming console work, right? Because the it's not only the voltage of the appliance, it's also the frequency of the TV signal. Is it coming in at, I don't know, 50, 60 hertz? So sometimes those
Or
gadgets
PAL
are
or
not.
NTSC.
Yes, they broadcast in different standards. The Now I think many of these appliances are made in one corner of the world, and they are made with universal compatibility. But sometimes that's a thing to consider. If you're really really in love with an appliance that's got a few years under the belt, you do want to bring it along because it carries meaning for you. You may want to check, will it work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing surprised with people that go to, say, common continental countries like the US to Canada, they still have to physically ship a car. It's not as simple as just driving your car across. There's all kinds of paperwork and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, obviously
Mm.
now this is getting a little wider than our purview. We don't get into the specifics of the logistics of moving things in between countries. But this is important to consider when you're putting together your list of nice to have to haves, all that kind of stuff. Involve the whole family, involve everybody, so that everybody's got a voice, and don't assume what is innocuous to you is innocuous to another person, because it may be that blanket.
Yeah, and sometimes it extends beyond the home, right? I had an intake conversation earlier today with a new client. It's a small mid-sized company from southern Germany, and they're sending an expatriate, a young male individual. They're going to send him to the Greater Toronto area. And I asked them, so what are you doing in terms of logistics support? So are you taking care of him with temp housing for the time being? Does he get a rental car? And this company doesn't do a lot of expatriation, so they were a bit caught flat-footed with my question. I said, well, the guy says he likes to ride his bicycle, so he expects to ride the bike there as well because he's going to move into the city. I said, that's interesting. You may want to educate your uh, employee that Toronto weather may not allow for bicycling year round. There may be certain months where that could be a challenge. And also the distances to travel may not be what he's used to from his urban setting in Central Europe. So familiarizing yourself or having somebody putting that into perspective for your employee or for yourself, what will your living situation be like? It's not just the home, the four walls in which you habitate, it's the whole infrastructure around it. What items will you need, or how will you need to be set up structurally? That is something to truly consider before you start your packing list.
Absolutely. Well, tell us what your experience is. If you've moved countries, what did you wish you had have taken? What you wish you hadn't have taken? Maybe there are lots of stories around that. Things that you
Want to
found.
look in my basement with all the boxes that I wish I hadn't taken? No, we can't throw that out.
And of course, no, that's right. You never know. You never know. You might need it. You might need it. And then we would love some. I always ask people, "What's your experience putting together IKEA furniture?" If that's your plan, to go there and build your house out of IKEA furniture, no matter where you are in the world, you need to consider how strong your marriage is when it comes to that kind of stuff, because that stuff can be.
I see that I've never had that experience.
Right.
There's so much. There's so many stories around the IKEA, and the only thing the worst part that I've ever experienced is maybe a screw or two were missing, but that was easily replaced.
Yeah.
I think the Swedes are onto something here. So
Oh no, they're certainly onto something. I mean, I will say that one time working with a young Chinese couple that moved from China to the US, where they had actually had experience with IKEA in China, but it's kind of an all-in-one package there. And they were saying to me, we were very surprised that when we ordered our IKEA stuff, it didn't automatically come with somebody who turned up and put it together for us. Like, we have to put it together here in this country. Don't have to do that in China. And that's so sometimes even for the same brand, the same experience is not the same process. So that became quite impactful for me. He said, we actually have to go and drive a car go to the store, put it in the back. It might be different now, of course, in these times.
You know what? We need to find somebody who works for IKEA to walk us through the process, because even their catalogs that they send out or that they distribute throughout the world are different depending on the corner of the world you go to.
Yeah, that's right.
That is a very culturally intelligent company from what I've seen so far. So they may be Vikings, but they know how to conquer the world with their furniture.
They certainly do, yes. There was a story the other day, a day before yesterday or something, where somebody was talking about advertising in IKEA in Saudi Arabia versus the base European country.
Yep.
And then so it was interesting. I think that was one of yours. I don't remember. It was something I remember someone mentioning about that. And just so culturally, someone had done some cultural research into what was going to be appropriate in advertising and putting that brand out there in that country. So probably, good idea. Let's find somebody that works for IKEA. If you're watching this and you work for IKEA, by the way, give us a call. Hello.
Give us a call.
Hello. Give us a call.
I will even find somebody who speaks Swedish for this program to
let me give you Christian's number.
Yes, hold it up on the camera, please.
Live on air.
Thank you very much.
No problem. All right,
So,
guys.
if you're in doubt whether to bring it or not, if you're really in doubt, probably you want to bring it. However, double check with everybody in the family if they are in agreement with you. So if you have consensus throughout the family, then it'll be essential. Now, there's one thing that came to mind when we created this image for this show. There was the key dangling from one of the letters. There's one thing that first-time expatriates sometimes do not take into account when everything sucks and it's foreign and they're abroad and nothing feels like home. There's a trick. It's a simple trick. It sounds super hokey coming from these white middle-aged guys, but the trick is your first vacation, your first trip away from your assignment location, make sure that trip is not back to your home country or to the location from which you relocated. Make it a trip into another environment. Maybe so if you're going from France to Korea, don't go back to France. Make it a trip to maybe Malaysia or Australia, which is closer by anyway. And when you come back into your home away from home and put the key into your away from home, it will feel like a home because now you're coming back to it from somewhere else. Sounds hokey and simple, works every single time. Trust me on that.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, thank you, everybody. Leave your comments. And again, if you like what you hear, subscribe to our YouTube channels. Tell your friends, share it around, and we will be back tomorrow with episode 108. Two Chaps, Many Cultures. Thank you very much, sir. I will see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.